Lady Serafina had never seen her father look so weak. The man who once commanded entire star systems now lay in his golden bed, struggling to breathe. His skin, normally a beautiful shade of blue like all Zephyrians, had turned pale and sickly. The crystal pendant around his neck, which should have been glowing bright with life energy, was barely flickering. "Father, what's happening to you?" Serafina whispered, holding his trembling hand. She had spent her whole life in this magnificent palace, surrounded by floating gardens and singing fountains. Everything here was perfect, peaceful, and safe. But now, fear crept into her heart like a cold shadow. Her father tried to speak, but only managed a few weak words. "The crystals, they're dying, my daughter. And when they die, we all die with them." Serafina didn't understand what he meant. The crystals had always been there, lighting their cities, powering their ships, keeping their world alive. They were eternal, or so she had been taught. How could something so powerful just stop working? The next morning brought terrible news. 3 more noble families had fallen ill with the same mysterious sickness. The palace healers were confused and scared. They had never seen anything like this before. Their advanced medicines, their magical treatments, nothing seemed to work. But the worst news came when Serafina walked to her favorite balcony overlooking the city. The great crystal towers that had always shone like stars were dimming. Some were already dark. In the distance, she could see smoke rising from the lower parts of the city. People were panicking. "My lady," came a voice behind her. It was Elder Korthik, her father's oldest advisor. His usually calm face was full of worry. "The council needs to meet immediately. The situation is worse than we thought." Serafina had never been allowed in the council meetings before. As a princess, she was expected to learn art, music, and languages, not politics or leadership. But with her father too sick to attend, she had to take his place. The council chamber was chaos. 12 of the most powerful beings in their galaxy were all talking at once, their voices echoing off the crystal walls. Some were angry, some were scared, and some were already making plans to escape to other worlds. "The outer colonies are already abandoning their posts," shouted one elder. "They know something we don't. Our neighboring star systems are moving their war fleets closer," warned another. "They can sense our weakness. We need to evacuate the noble families before it's too late," suggested a third. But Elder Korthik slammed his staff on the ground, creating a loud ringing sound that made everyone go quiet. "Running away won't solve anything. If we abandon our people, we'll be no better than common criminals." That's when Serafina noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the great table in the center of the room was a map of their planet. Red dots marked all the places where the crystals had failed. There were hundreds of them, spreading like a disease across their world. "How long do we have?" she asked quietly. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her. She had never spoken in a council meeting before, and some of the elders looked annoyed that she had dared to interrupt. 6 months, maybe less. Elder Korthik replied sadly, "The main crystal network is failing faster than we can repair it. Soon, even this palace will lose power." Serafina felt dizzy. 6 months. That wasn't enough time to evacuate billions of people. It wasn't enough time to find a new home planet. It wasn't enough time for anything. But there might be another way, Elder Korthik continued. He walked to an ancient bookshelf and pulled out a dusty old volume. "Your father was researching this before he fell ill. There are legends about something called the Heart of Zephyria, a power source so strong it could restore our entire crystal network." The other elders started murmuring among themselves. Some laughed, some shook their heads. "Those are just children's stories," one of them said. "Fairy tales to help people sleep at night." "Maybe," Elder Korthik admitted. "But according to these texts, the heart is real. It's hidden somewhere in the void canyons, in the most dangerous part of our planet, the place where no one has ever returned from." Serafina had heard stories about the void canyons. They were filled with floating rocks, gravity storms, and creatures that could tear apart a spaceship with their bare claws. Even the bravest explorers avoided that place. "So you're saying our only hope is to send someone into certain death?" asked one of the elders. "I'm saying it's the only option we haven't tried," Elder Korthik replied. The room erupted in arguments again. Some elders wanted to organize a military expedition. Others insisted it was too dangerous. A few suggested they should just focus on evacuating the important people and forget about everyone else. But Serafina wasn't listening to their arguments anymore. She was thinking about the people in the lower city. She had seen them from her balcony, but she had never really thought about them as real people with real lives. Now she imagined them scared and confused, watching their world slowly die while the nobles argued about what to do. She thought about her father, lying weak and helpless in his bed. She thought about all the children who would never grow up if their world died. She thought about the billions of people who were counting on their leaders to save them. I'll go, she said quietly. The arguing stopped. Everyone stared at her as if she had just said she wanted to jump off the palace roof. Excuse me, Elder Korthik asked. I'll go to the Void Canyons. I'll find the heart of Zephyria. Her voice was shaking, but she forced herself to stand up straight. Someone has to try. The elders burst into laughter. Not cruel laughter, but the kind of laughter adults make when a child says something silly. My dear princess. One of them said gently, you've never even left the palace grounds. The Void Canyons would destroy you in minutes. You don't understand how dangerous it is out there. Added another, you've lived your whole life in comfort and safety. You don't know anything about survival or fighting or finding your way through hostile territory. They were right, and Serafina knew it. She had never faced any real danger in her life. Her biggest challenge had been choosing which dress to wear to dinner parties. She had never been hungry, never been cold, never had to fight for anything. But she also knew that no one else was volunteering. The elders were too old to set in their ways, too afraid. The military leaders were busy preparing for war with the neighboring systems. The other nobles were making plans to escape. You're right, she said, her voice getting stronger. I don't know anything about survival. I've never faced real danger. I've never even been outside these palace walls. She looked around the room, at all the powerful faces staring at her. This task is probably too big for someone like me. She paused, taking a deep breath. But I'll try anyway. The room went completely silent. Even the sound of the fountains outside seemed to fade away. Elder Korthik was looking at her with something she had never seen before. In his eyes, it wasn't pity or amusement. It was respect. Princess. He said softly, do you understand what you're volunteering for? This isn't a game or an adventure story. If you go to the Void Canyons, you'll probably die. And even if you somehow survive, you might not find anything. The heart of Zephyria might just be a legend. Serafina nodded. I understand. But if I don't try, everyone dies anyway. At least this way, there's a chance. She looked around the room one more time. I know I'm not the person you would choose for this mission. I know I'm not strong enough or brave enough or smart enough. But I'm the only one willing to do it. The elders exchanged glances. Some of them still looked skeptical, but others were, nodding slowly. Finally, Elder Korthik spoke. Very well, Princess, if you're determined to do this, then we'll help you prepare. But understand this, once you leave the palace, we can't protect you anymore. You'll be on your own. As Serafina walked back to her chambers that night, she felt both terrified and excited. For the first time in her life, she was going to do something that really mattered, something that could save everyone she cared about. She stopped at her father's room to check on him. He was sleeping, but his breathing seemed a little easier. She kissed his forehead gently. I'm going to save you, Father, she whispered. I'm going to save all of us. I don't know how, but I'll find a way. Outside her window, she could see the crystal towers flickering weakly in the night. Soon, those lights would go out forever unless she succeeded. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, it made her feel determined that tomorrow, her real life would begin. The morning sun felt different on Serafina's face as she stepped through the palace gates. For the first time in her life, everything looked so much bigger than it had from her balcony window. The sounds were louder, the smells were stronger. And the people, there were so many people. She had spent 3 days preparing for this moment. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of the outside world. Her silk dress, which had seemed practical in her room, now felt completely wrong. Everyone else wore simple clothes made for work and movement. She stood out like a bright flower in a field of grass. "Excuse me," she said to a woman selling fruit at a nearby stand. "Could you tell me how to get to the transport station?" The woman looked at her strangely. "Transport station? You mean the port where the ships take off?" "Yes, that's right." Serafina smiled politely, the way she had been taught to greet visitors at the palace. The woman pointed down a crowded street. "Keep walking straight for about 20 minutes. You can't miss it." "But lady, are you sure you want to go there? It's not a place for someone like you." Serafina thanked her and started walking. Someone like you. What did that mean? She had never thought about how she might appear to others in the palace. Everyone knew exactly who she was and treated her accordingly. Here, she was just a stranger. In fancy clothes, the deeper she walked into the city, the more she realized how little she knew about her own world. The buildings were smaller and closer together than she had imagined. Families lived in tiny spaces that could fit inside her bedroom closet. Children played in the streets because they had no gardens or playrooms. But what struck her most was how hard everyone was working. People were fixing things, building things, carrying heavy loads from place to place. Their hands were rough and dirty, their faces tired but determined. She had never seen anyone work like this before. At the transport station, the chaos was overwhelming. Hundreds of beings from different worlds were coming and going, loading cargo, shouting instructions, and moving with purpose. The noise was incredible. Serafina had never heard anything louder than the gentle music that played during palace dinners. She approached a desk where a gruff-looking man was organizing flight schedules. "Hello," she said in her most polite voice. "I need to hire a guide and a ship to take me to the Void Canyons." The man looked up from his work and stared at her for a long moment. Then he started laughing. Not a nice laugh, but the kind of laugh that made her feel small and foolish. "The Void Canyons? Lady, do you have any idea what you're asking for? I understand it's dangerous." Serafina replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I have an important mission." "Important mission," the man repeated, still chuckling. "Let me guess, you're some rich kid looking for adventure. Well, let me tell you something about the Void Canyons. They don't care how much money your daddy has. They'll kill you just as dead as anyone else." Serafina felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment, but she pressed on. "I'm willing to pay whatever it costs. I just need someone experienced to guide me." The man shook his head. "Even if I wanted to help you, which I don't, there's only one pilot crazy enough to go near those canyons, Commander Thane, and he's not going to waste his time with a pampered princess." "Where can I find him?" Doc 7. "But don't say I didn't warn you." Serafina found Commander Thane working on his ship, his hands covered in grease and his clothes worn from years of use. He was tall and muscular, with scars on his arms that told stories of dangerous adventures. When she approached, he didn't even look up from his work. "Commander Thane," she said politely, "I'd like to hire you for a mission." "Not interested," he replied without stopping his work. "But you don't even know what the mission is yet." "Don't need to. I can tell just by looking at you that whatever you want, I don't want to be part of it." Serafina felt frustrated. "Why won't you even listen to me?" Thane finally looked up, wiping his hands on a dirty cloth. "Because I've seen your type before. Rich kids who think adventure is fun until they realize it's actually dangerous. You probably want to go somewhere exciting so you can tell stories at your fancy parties." "I want to go to the Void Canyons," Serafina said quietly. Thane's expression changed. The amusement left his eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. "No, you don't trust me on this one." "Yes, I do. My planet is dying, and there's something in those canyons that might save it." "Your planet is dying." Thane laughed again, but this time it sounded bitter. "Lady, planets don't just die, and even if they did, there's nothing in the Void Canyons except death and darkness." Serafina pulled out a small crystal from her bag. It was one of the power sources from the palace, but instead of glowing brightly, it was barely flickering. This is happening all over our world. The crystals are failing, and when they stop working completely, everyone will die. Thane took the crystal and examined it carefully. His expression grew serious. How long has this been happening? A few weeks, maybe longer. The council thinks we have 6 months before everything shuts down. For the first time, Thane seemed to be taking her seriously. And you think the answer is in the Void Canyons? There are legends about something called the Heart of Zephyria. It's supposed to be powerful enough to restore our entire crystal network. Legends, Thane said. Handing back the crystal. You want to risk your life on children's stories? I want to risk my life to save my people, Serafina replied. Isn't that what heroes do? Thane stared at her for a long moment. Heroes? Lady, let me tell you something about heroes. Most of them are dead, and the ones who aren't dead are usually broken in ways that never heal. So you won't help me? I didn't say that. Thane walked around his ship, checking various parts. But if I do this, we do it my way. No fancy clothes, no special treatment, no complaints when things get tough, and definitely no bringing half your wardrobe on a survival mission. Serafina looked down at her 3 large bags, packed with everything she thought she might need. These are just basic supplies. Basic supplies? Thane opened one of the bags and pulled out an ornate ceremonial gown. You planning to attend a formal dinner in the Void Canyons? I wasn't sure what I might need. What you need is to learn the difference between surviving and living in luxury. Come back when you've figured that out. Serafina spent the rest of the day wandering through the city, trying to understand what Thane meant. She watched people going about their daily lives, noticed how they dressed, how they moved, how they solved problems. Everything was so different from the palace. As evening approached, she realized she had no idea where she was or how to get back to the palace. The streets all looked the same, and she had been too distracted to pay attention to her route. For the first time in her life, she was truly lost. She tried asking for directions, but her formal way of speaking made people uncomfortable. Some ignored her. Others gave her suspicious looks. One young man even asked if she was feeling all right because she sounded so strange. Night fell, and Serafina found herself alone in a part of the city she had never seen before. The buildings were older here, some of them damaged by the failing crystal network. There were no street lights, no security guards, no one to protect her. She was scared, hungry, and tired. Her feet hurt from walking in shoes that were meant for palace floors, not city streets. She had never been hungry before, never been cold, never been alone like this. Finally, she saw a warm light coming from a small building, a sign outside. Red Mari's shelter, all welcome. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. The room was full of people sitting on simple benches, eating soup from plain bowls. An elderly woman with kind eyes approached her. Hello, dear. You look lost. Are you all right? Serafina wanted to say that she was fine, that she didn't need help, that she was important and someone would come looking for her. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she started crying. I don't know where I am, she whispered. I don't know how to get home. The woman, who introduced herself as Mari, didn't ask any questions. She simply gave Serafina a bowl of soup and a place to sit. The soup was simple but warm, and it tasted better than any fancy meal she had ever eaten at the palace. First time away from home, Mari asked gently. Serafina nodded, not trusting herself to speak. It's scary at first. Everything seems so big and complicated. But you learn. People are stronger than they think they are. As Serafina ate her soup, she listened to the conversations around her. People were talking about their families, their jobs, their struggles with the crystal crisis. These weren't the distant subjects she had seen from her balcony. These were real people with real problems, and they were suffering while she had been living in comfort. That night, sleeping on a simple cot in the shelter, Serafina made a decision. She would learn to survive in this world. She would become the person her people needed her to be, even if it meant giving up everything she had ever known about herself. Tomorrow, she would start again. 3 weeks had passed since Serafina's first night at the shelter. Her soft hands were now covered in calluses from lifting heavy equipment and practicing with survival tools. Her perfect posture had changed too. She now walked with the steady, careful steps of someone who had learned to balance a heavy backpack every morning. She practiced in the abandoned warehouse that Mari had shown her. She learned to fix broken machines, to navigate using star maps, and to fight with the basic weapons that travelers carried for protection. Her expensive dresses had been traded for practical clothes that could handle dirt. In rough conditions, Commander Thane found her there one morning, swinging a practice sword at a training dummy made of old metal and cloth. Her movements were still clumsy, but there was determination in every swing. "You're still here," he said. Not sounding particularly surprised. "I told you I was serious," Serafina replied, not stopping her practice. "I've been learning everything I can about survival and navigation. I've studied maps of the outer regions, read every report about the Void Canyons." Thane watched her for a few minutes. Reading about something and actually doing it are very different things. "I know that now," she said, finally lowering her sword. "But I also know that if I don't try, everyone I care about will die." Something in her voice must have convinced him, because Thane nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this my way, with my rules. And if you can't keep up, I'm leaving you behind. I understand, do you? Because the Void Canyons aren't just dangerous, they're impossible. The gravity changes without warning. Rocks the size of buildings float through the air, and the creatures that live there, they're not like anything you've ever seen." Serafina felt her heart racing, but she kept her voice steady. "What kind of creatures?" "Sky serpents, mostly. They're bigger than our ship, and they hunt anything that moves. Then there are the Whisperers, beings that can get inside your head and make you see things that aren't there. They feed on fear and doubt. Have you been there before?" "Once, lost half my crew." Thane's expression grew dark. "I swore I'd never go back. But you will. For me, I will. For your people. Because if what you're saying is true, then everyone on this planet is in danger. Not just the nobles in their fancy palaces." 2 days later, they took off in Thane's ship. Serafina had never been in space before, and the view of her planet from above took her breath away. The crystal cities that had once shone like jewels were now dim and fading. Dark patches spread across the continents like a sickness. "It's worse than I thought," she whispered. "It's worse than anyone thought," Thane agreed. "Look at the outer settlements. They're already going dark." The journey to the Void Canyons took 2 days. As they flew further from civilization, the landscape below became stranger and more dangerous. Mountains floated in the air, held up by invisible forces. Rivers flowed upward, defying gravity. And everywhere, there was an eerie silence that made Serafina's skin crawl. "We're entering the canyon region now," Thane announced. "Hold on to something." The ship suddenly shook violently as they hit a gravity storm. Serafina felt her stomach drop as the artificial gravity inside the ship struggled to adjust. Through the window, she could see massive rocks spinning slowly through the air, some of them glowing with strange energy. "How do we navigate through this?" she asked. "Very carefully," Thane replied, his hands dancing over the controls. "The gravity fields change every few minutes. One wrong move and we'll be crushed between floating mountains." As if to prove his point, a boulder the size of a house drifted past their window, so close that Serafina could see the strange markings carved into its surface. "What are those symbols?" she asked. "Ancient writing. No one knows what it means anymore. The people who carved them have been gone for thousands of years." The ship shuddered again. An alarm started beeping. "What's wrong?" Serafina asked. "We're caught in a gravity well. It's pulling us toward that floating island." Thane pointed to a large chunk of rock ahead of them, covered in twisted metal structures and glowing crystals. "Can we get free?" "Not without more power. And our main engine just overheated." Thane's voice was grim. "We're going to have to land and make repairs." The landing was rough. The ship bounced twice before coming to rest on the rocky surface of the floating island. Outside, the air was thin and cold, and strange sounds echoed from the crystal formations around them. How long will the repairs take? Serafina asked. For ours, maybe 5. But we need replacement power cells, and I don't see any lying around. Here, what about those crystals? They're glowing. Maybe they have power. Thane shook his head. Those aren't power crystals. There's something else. Something that makes people see things that aren't real. He looked at her seriously. Whatever you do, don't go near them alone. But as Thane worked on the ship's engine, Serafina realized they didn't have a choice. The power cells were completely drained, and without them, they would be stuck on this island forever. She could see crystal formations deeper in the island's cave system, some of them glowing brighter than others. I'm going to look for power cells, she told Thane. No, absolutely not. Those caves are full of whisperers. Do we have another choice? Thane looked at their dead ship, then at the darkening sky around them. Take this, he said, handing her a small device. It's a reality anchor. If the whispers start getting to you, press the button. It might help clear your head. The caves were darker than anything Serafina had ever experienced. Her flashlight seemed to barely penetrate. The blackness and every sound echoed strangely off the crystal walls. She could hear something moving in the shadows, not footsteps, but something like whispers carried on the wind. Hello, little princess. Came a voice from nowhere and everywhere at once. Lost and far from home, Serafina's heart pounded, but she kept walking deeper into the cave. I'm not afraid of you. Oh, but you should be. You're so small, so weak, so unprepared for what's coming. The voice was right. She realized she was weak. She had lived her whole life in comfort and safety, never facing real danger. What made her think she could save anyone? Look around you, the voice continued. See how hopeless your situation is. Suddenly, the cave walls seemed to shimmer and change. Instead of crystal formations, she saw images of her home planet. But in these visions, the planet was dying faster than she had imagined. Cities were going dark. People were fleeing in panic, and her father was getting sicker and sicker. You're too late, the voice whispered. Even if you find what you're looking for, you'll never make it home in time. Everyone you love will be dead. Serafina fell to her knees, overwhelmed by despair. The vision seemed so real, so possible. Maybe she had been foolish to think she could make a difference. You're just a pampered princess, the voice said, and now it sounded like all the people who had doubted her. You'll never be strong enough. You'll never be brave enough. You'll never be enough. For a moment, Serafina believed it. She saw herself as others saw her, weak, sheltered, naive. But then she remembered Mari's words from that first night in the shelter. People are stronger than they think they are. She thought about the families she had met in the lower city, struggling to keep their lights on as the crystals failed. She thought about the children playing in the streets, not knowing that their world was dying. She thought about her father, trusting her to save everyone. You're wrong, she said, standing up slowly. I'm afraid. I'm weak. I am unprepared. She looked around at the shifting shadows. But I'm here anyway, and I'm not giving up. The reality-anchored device in her hand began to glow, and the vision started to fade. Fear doesn't make someone weak, she continued, her voice growing stronger. Fear makes someone careful, and being careful is how you survive. You cannot defeat us, the voice hissed. But it sounded less confident now. I don't need to defeat you, Serafina replied. I just need to not let you defeat me. She pressed the button on the reality anchor, and the cave returned to normal. The whisperers' voices faded to distant echoes, and there, in an alcove she hadn't noticed before, were several glowing power cells. When she returned to the ship, Thane was waiting with a worried expression. You were gone for over an hour. I was about to come looking for you. I found what we need, she said, showing him the power cells. And I learned something important. What's that? I learned that being afraid doesn't mean you're weak. It means you understand the danger. And understanding the danger is the first step to surviving it. Thane looked at her with new respect. The whispers got to you, didn't they? They tried. But I remember that I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing It for everyone back home who can't do it themselves. As they prepared to leave the island, Serafina felt different. Not because she was no longer afraid. She was still terrified of what lay ahead. But now she understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear. Courage was feeling afraid and doing what needed to be done anyway. The ship lifted off into the strange, shifting sky of the void canyons. Ahead of them lay even greater dangers. But Serafina was ready to face them. She had learned to trust herself, and that made all the difference. The deeper they traveled into the void canyons, the stranger everything became. Gravity pulled in different directions every few minutes. Sometimes they felt heavy as rocks. Other times they floated like feathers. The ship's instruments kept spinning wildly, unable to make sense of the changing forces around them. There, Thane pointed ahead through the front window. Do you see that structure? Serafina pressed her face against the glass. In the distance, carved into the side of a floating mountain, was something that looked like a temple. It was enormous, with pillars that seemed to reach up to the stars, and walls covered in the same ancient symbols they had seen before. That's it, she whispered. That has to be where the heart is hidden? Maybe, Thane said cautiously. But look at how old it is. This place has been here for thousands of years. If there really was some powerful energy source inside, don't you think someone would have found it by now? Serafina didn't answer. She was too busy staring at the temple. Something about it felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow faintly, as if they were responding to her presence. Landing near the temple was tricky. The ground kept shifting beneath them, and strange winds blew from every direction. When they finally touched down, both of them sat in silence for a moment. Last chance to turn back, Thane said quietly. We've come too far to give up now, Serafina replied. My people are counting on us. The entrance to the temple was a massive doorway carved with intricate patterns. As they approached, Serafina noticed that some of the symbols looked like the ones from her family's coat of arms. That was impossible, though. Her family had only ruled for a few hundred years, and this place was ancient. Thane, look at this, she called him over. These symbols, I think I've seen them before. He examined the carvings carefully. They're definitely old. Older than any civilization I know about. But you're right, they do look familiar somehow. The door was so heavy that it took both of them to push it open. Inside, the temple was filled with a soft, blue light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air was warm and humid, and they could hear something like a heartbeat echoing through the corridors. What is that sound? Serafina asked. I don't know, but it's getting louder as we go deeper. They walked through hallway after hallway, past rooms filled with strange machines and walls covered in more of the mysterious writing. The heartbeat sound grew stronger with each step, until it felt like the entire temple was alive and breathing around them. Finally, they reached an enormous chamber at the heart of the temple. What they found there was nothing like what either of them had expected. Instead of a crystal or a machine, there was a massive, living creature suspended in the center of the room. It looked almost like a tree, but made of flesh and light instead of wood and leaves. Thousands of glowing tendrils extended from its body, reaching into the walls and floor like roots. What is that? Thane whispered. Before Serafina could answer, the creature opened what might have been eyes. They were ancient and sad, filled with a wisdom that seemed older than the stars themselves. Finally, it spoke, its voice echoing inside their minds rather than their ears. Someone has come. Serafina stepped forward, her heart pounding. Are you the heart of Zephyria? I am what your people call by that name, yes? Though I have been many things to many civilizations, I am the life force of this world, the energy that flows through every crystal, every living thing. Then you can save our planet, Serafina said urgently. The crystal network is failing. People are dying. Please, you have to help us. The creature's expression grew even sadder. Child, I am not refusing to help. I am dying. Dying? But you're the source of all our power. How can you be dying? Because your ancestors enslaved me. The heart replied simply. Thousands of years ago, They discovered my existence and decided to use my life force to power their civilization. They built the crystal network to drain my energy and trap me here to prevent my escape. Serafina felt as if the ground was falling away beneath her feet. That's impossible. Our people would never do something like that. Look around you, child. Look at the symbols on these walls. They tell the story of how it began. As the heart spoke, the symbols on the temple walls began to glow brighter. Suddenly, Serafina could understand them, as if the knowledge was being placed directly into her mind. She saw images of her ancestors discovering the heart of the first crystal networks being built, of the creature being bound and imprisoned. And there, in the final images, she saw her own family crest. The first High Chancellor Velter, her own ancestor, had been the one to order the heart's imprisonment. No, she whispered. This can't be true. Your family has ruled for centuries on the power stolen from me. The heart continued. And now, after all this time, I'm finally dying. The crystal network fails because I no longer have the strength to feed it. Thane moved closer to Serafina. What does this mean for our mission? It means we have a choice to make, the heart said. You could try to force me to continue powering your civilization. There are machines here that could extend my life for a few more years, maybe decades. But eventually, I will die anyway, and your world will die with me. What's the other choice? Serafina asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. You could set me free, remove the chains that bind me to this place, and allow me to heal. In time, I might recover enough to help your people find a new way to power their world. But it would mean starting over, building a new kind of civilization. And what would happen to our current civilization? It would end, the heart said. Honestly, the crystal network would shut down completely. Your cities would go dark. The social order that has existed for centuries would collapse. Serafina felt sick. She had come here to save her people, but now she was being asked to choose between forcing a sentient being to continue suffering or watching her entire world collapse. How long would we have? She asked quietly. If you free me immediately, perhaps 6 months before I'm strong enough to begin helping you transition to new energy sources. During that time, your people would have to learn to live without the crystal network. That's not enough time, Thane said. Billions of people depend on those crystals for everything: light, heat, transportation, communication. Without them, society would fall apart. Yes, the heart agreed. Many would suffer. Some would die. But eventually, you could build something better. Something that doesn't require enslaving another being. Serafina looked around the temple, at the ancient symbols. That told the story of her family's crime. She thought about the nobles in their comfortable palaces, living in luxury built on centuries of stolen energy. She thought about the people in the lower city, already struggling as the crystals failed. There has to be another way, she said desperately. Child, I have been thinking about this for 1,000 years. There is no easy solution. Someone will suffer no matter what you choose. What would you do if you were me? The heart was quiet. For a long moment, I would remember that true strength comes not from power over others, but from the courage to do what is right, even when it is difficult. Serafina closed her eyes and thought about everything she had learned since leaving the palace. She thought about Mari, who had shown kindness to a stranger without asking for anything in return. She thought about the children playing in the streets, unaware that their world was built on injustice. She thought about her father, lying sick in his bed, a victim of the same system that had made him powerful. When she opened her eyes, she knew what she had to do. I'm going to free you, she said quietly. Serafina, no. Thane said urgently. Think about what you're saying. You're talking about ending civilization as we know it. I'm talking about ending a civilization built on slavery, she replied. Maybe it's time for something better. She looked up at the heart. If I free you, will you really help us build a new way of life? I will try, the heart promised. I cannot guarantee success, but I will do everything in my power to help your people survive the transition, and you'll forgive us for what our ancestors did, child. Forgiveness is not something that can be given or taken. It is something that grows naturally when old wounds are allowed to heal. Serafina walked to the control panel she could see connected to the heart's prison. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I don't know if this is the right choice," she said, "but I know that keeping you enslaved is wrong. And if we're going to build a better world, we have to start by doing better ourselves." She placed her hand on the control panel and began the process of setting the heart free. The moment she did, she felt the entire temple shake as energy that had been trapped for millennia began to flow freely once again. The journey back to the capital felt like traveling through a dying world. As their ship flew over the cities below, Serafina could see the crystal networks failing faster than ever. Entire districts had gone dark, and smoke rose from places where backup generators had overloaded. The heart's liberation was already having an effect. "Look at that." Thane pointed to a massive transport ship loaded with people fleeing the darkening cities. "The evacuation has already started." Serafina's stomach churned with guilt and fear. Had she made the right choice? Every person suffering down there was suffering because of her decision. But she forced herself to remember the heart's words about building something better. "The council is going to try to rescue the moment we land," Thane warned her. "They're not going to want to hear about moral choices when their world is falling apart." "I know," Serafina replied, "but I have to try to make them understand." When they reached the palace, crowds of angry people had already gathered outside the gates. Word had somehow spread that the princess had returned, and many blamed her for the worsening crisis. Some carried signs demanding answers, others shouted accusations. Princess Serafina called out a reporter as she stepped off the ship. "Is it true that you caused the complete failure of the crystal network? Is it true that you found something in the void canyons but chose not to use it?" shouted another. Serafina wanted to run and hide, but she forced herself to stop and face the crowd. "I found what I was looking for," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "And I learned some difficult truths about our world. Tomorrow, I'll explain everything to anyone who wants to listen." The council meeting the next morning was even worse than she had expected. The 12 elders sat in a semicircle, their faces full of anger and disappointment. Elder Korthik looked older. Then she remembered, as if the stress of the crisis had aged him years in just a few weeks. "Princess Serafina," he began formally, "you were sent to find a way to save our civilization. Instead, you have accelerated its destruction. The crystal network is failing faster than ever before. Entire cities are losing power. People are dying." "I know," Serafina said quietly, "and I take full responsibility for my actions." "Then you admit that you failed in your mission?" "No. I completed my mission exactly as I was supposed to. I found the heart of Zephyria, and I learned the truth about our world." "What truth?" demanded Elder Corvin, one of the younger council members. Serafina took a deep breath. "The truth that our entire civilization has been built on slavery. That the heart of Zephyria isn't a power source, it's a living being. That our ancestors captured and enslaved thousands of years ago." The council erupted in angry voices. Some called her a liar. Others accused her of being influenced by alien creatures. And a few demanded that she be arrested for treason. "Even if what you're saying is true," Elder Korthik said when the noise died down, "it doesn't change our current situation. People need power to live. They need the crystal network, and they'll have it again," Serafina replied. "But it will be different, better. The heart has promised to help us build a new kind of energy system, one that doesn't require enslaving anyone." "How long will that take?" asked Elder Corvin. 6 months to a year, maybe longer." "And what are people supposed to do in the meantime? Live in darkness, freeze in the winter, watch their children go hungry because the food distribution systems have failed?" Serafina didn't have good answers to these questions, and she knew it. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I know that continuing to enslave the heart would have been wrong." "Wrong?" Elder Corvin stood up angrily. "You think letting billions of people suffer is better than using a power source that has worked for centuries? I think building our future on someone else's pain is no future at all." The argument continued for hours. Some elders wanted to send a military force back to the void canyons to recapture the heart. Others suggested evacuating to other planets and abandoning Zephyria entirely. A few even proposed arresting Serafina and putting her on trial for destroying their civilization. But their arguments were interrupted by a commotion outside, through the tall windows. They could see crowds gathering in the main plaza. Someone was speaking to them through a portable sound system. That's Mari, Serafina realized. She's organizing the people from the lower city. Elder Korthik looked confused. Who is Mari? Someone who understands what really matters. Serafina said, standing up, excuse me, but I need to go talk to my people. You cannot leave this council session, Elder Corvin declared. Watch me, Serafina replied, walking toward the door. Outside in the plaza, Mari stood on a makeshift platform, addressing hundreds of people who had gathered to hear her speak. When she saw Serafina approaching, she smiled and gestured for her to join her on the platform. Friends, Mari called out, Princess Serafina has returned with news about our future. The crowd was a mix of people from all levels of society. There were nobles in expensive clothes standing next to workers in practical gear. There were families with children, elderly people, and young adults who had never known a world without crystal power. I know you're scared. Serafina began, her voice carrying across the plaza. I know the crystal networks are failing, and I know that many of you are blaming me for what's happening. You should be blamed, shouted someone from the crowd. You were supposed to save us, and I did save you. Serafina replied, but not in the way you expected. I saved you from building your future on a foundation of slavery and injustice. She told them everything about the heart, about their ancestors' crimes, about the choice she had made. She was honest about the difficulties ahead and admitted that she didn't have all the answers. So what you're telling us, called out a man near the front, is that our comfortable life is over? I'm telling you that our comfortable life was never real, Serafina replied. It was built on someone else's suffering. Real comfort, real peace, can only come when we know that nobody else is paying the price for our happiness. That's easy for you to say, shouted a woman holding a small child. You're rich. You'll be fine no matter what happens. But what about people like us? People like you are exactly who I'm thinking about, Serafina said. When I lived in the palace, I never saw how hard life was for ordinary families. I never understood that the crystal crisis was hurting the poor long before it affected the rich. This is our chance to build a world that works for everyone, not just the powerful. An old man raised his hand. But how do we survive while you're building this better world? Together, Mari answered, stepping forward. We share what we have. We help each other. We remember that we're all in this together. The heart has promised to help us transition to new energy sources, Serafina added. But in the meantime, we need to take care of each other. We need to share resources, work together, and prove that we're ready for a better way of life. The crowd was quiet for a moment. Then a young woman near the back spoke up. What if you're wrong? What if this new world you're promising doesn't work? Then we'll figure something else out, Serafina said honestly. But I'd rather try to build something good and fail than succeed at something built on injustice. Slowly, people in the crowd began nodding. Not everyone was convinced, but many seemed willing to try. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. Communities that had never worked together before began organizing to share resources and help each other through the power shortages. The nobles who had opposed Serafina found themselves increasingly isolated. When they tried to organize resistance to the new order, they discovered that most people were already moving forward without them. 3 months later, the first of the new energy systems came online. They were different from the crystal networks, cleaner, more efficient, and powered by the heart's willing partnership rather than forced extraction. The transition was still difficult, but people were adapting. Serafina stood in the same plaza where she had given her speech, watching children from all backgrounds playing together. Under the light of the new energy systems, her father, recovered from his illness now that the heart was healing, stood beside her. I still don't understand everything you did, he said quietly, but I'm proud of you for having the courage to do what you thought was right. I was scared the whole time, Serafina admitted. I still am, sometimes. Good, her father smiled. Being scared means you understand how important your choices are. Mari approached them, carrying a data pad full of reports from the various community groups that had formed during the transition. The food distribution networks are running at 80% efficiency, she reported. The new housing projects are ahead of schedule, and the children's education programs are already teaching kids about the real history of our world. Any problems? Serafina asked. Some of the outer settlements are still struggling with the power transition, and there's still a group of former nobles trying to organize opposition to the new government structure.